All right, so this is how I get my closures to lay flat when I'm making a closure wig. I'm going to use this cap. It's a Q-Fit. I got it from my local beauty supply store. Item number 5011. If you are ordering off of Amazon, make sure to type that number in. And I'm just going to pin down my cap on my wig head that is the size of my head because this is going to be for me. And the 22 or the 21.5 is usually like the average size head for the majority of the wigs that I make. So I'm going to take my, this is like an HD closure that I have. It's a 5x5 transparent lace. I'm just going to go ahead and pin that on the back of, like the nape of the neck of the mannequin head. Now, this is how I get it flat, by pinning it to the back of the head, the nape of the head, not the front where the forehead would be. This is the back of your head, where like the nape of your neck would be. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that closure down where the hair is, right past the line of the cap, about an inch, half an inch to an inch, well, 3/4 to an inch. And then I'm going to pin that down with a couple of pins and secure that lace while I am preparing to go ahead and sew this closure down. Now, the way that you're going to see me sew this closure down is how I learned when I wasn't using this reverse, like sew it in the back method and just sewing it on the forehead part of the wig block. I would do this to make sure that the closure did not, like the back of the closure didn't shift left or right, and it was like angled in the middle. So the way that you see me sewing here, I'm so used to sewing it that way. We're using 2 needles just to make sure that it stayed in the middle and didn't shift to the left or to the right. So you don't have to do that when you're doing this method where you're pinning the closure to the nape of the neck, because yeah, you just don't have to. But I'm so used to doing it, I'm going to continue to do it. So if you don't do this nape of the neck method and you're just sewing it on traditionally, using the forehead of the block, then yeah, I use 2 needles just to make sure that it stays in the very middle. And it lays like straight. It doesn't have that forehead part where you have to have a hump. It's kind of flat back here on the nape of this wig block. So that helps it to be flat when you sew it down. You see, you're just going to have a flat closure, no lumps, no bumps, no humps, because you're using the back of the wig block instead of the front of the wig block where there's like a curvature. And that gives many people problems, including myself, making the closure be flat. Now, that's just one of the tips for how I do when I'm sewing a closure on, to make sure once that the wig is complete, the closure is flat and everything else. Now, I'm using 2 different needles, like I said, just to make sure it stays in the middle and doesn't shift to the left or to the right and doesn't bulk up. And then I'm not going to use this cotton thread to my left. I'm going to use nylon thread to my right because it's way smaller, way thinner, because it'll help it'll help the wig the closure lay flatter because you have smaller thread. I also use nylon thread to sew in hair on people, like do traditional sew-ins, because the nylon thread does not suck up the oils and the moisture in your hair like cotton does. So I'm going to take my needle and not start in the very middle. I'm going to start off to the left a little bit, and then I'm going to bring it all the way over to the right, all the way down to the end. And I'm going to do the same thing when I get the other needle right here. I'm going to start off to the right a little bit and sew to the left, because I don't want 2 knots in the very back middle of my closure. Again, you can use one needle and thread for this and you would probably not have this problem. But this is what I do when I'm trying to keep the closure very much in the middle and not shifting to the left or the right. So I do this to kind of not have the knots there. I'll sew both ways with 2 different needles to make sure everything's staying in the middle. So I'm going to sew, let's say, 1/4 of an inch or less in between my strokes of the needle. You'll see me just, doing the regular sewing of it. But once I get to the end of the closure, you're going to see me kind of, okay, so right here. So this is, I just sewed it like 1/4 of an inch in between. But once I get right here, I space it out a little more than 1/4 of an inch, more like 1/2 of an inch. And I go all the way down to the end. And then I come back up and go back in with my needle and thread through the extra space in the 1/2 of an inch that I left. I hope you understand. I made a bigger space, so when I come back up with my needle, I'm going to sew in those spaces so that the thread isn't all bulked up, so much thread. And then I'll take the needle back up and I'll tie a knot upwards, like past, well, I'll show you. I'll tell you once I get back up that way. So I'm going back up with the needle in the spots where there is space in between that 1/2 inch that I sewed. And then I'll tie my needle, the end of my thread, I'll tie my thread up here at the end so I don't have a knot near the forehead where the closure is supposed to be laying flat and looking amazing. I want my knot up here instead of down to the very end of my closure. So I'm going to try it on. All right, so my camera's messed up. I'm doing a real ghetto type of thing where I'm recording the computer screen because it will not upload to YouTube because all the files are missing. Don't know what's going on. But just to go back a little bit, I want to show you what I was talking about when I was sewing. So here I'll sew like this much apart. And then once I get down here, I'll open it up a little bit. And then I'll sew like that. And then when I come back up, I'll fill in those holes that I made bigger. I'll use that space to sew back up so it doesn't be all jumbled up on each other. Then I'll tie the knot here. And that's it. If you want to see more of those videos like this, let me know, and hopefully my camera will work next time.